Okay, let's talk a bit more about the MOU. Stevie O'Brien is a Liberal strategist, principal and founding partner rather. Oh, I'll do that again. Blah, 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 blah. Well, let's talk a bit more about this MOU. Stevie O'Brien is a Liberal strategist, principal and founding partner at Barrack Hill, and Conservative strategist Cole Hogan. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
You know, even before we sat down, I was going to ask you about the challenge this type of MOU creates for the Prime Minister in terms of caucus unity. And then as we go to record this, we get the news that Steven Guilbeault has now resigned his position in cabinet. What does that portend for this government and the challenge it's going to have with its caucus moving forward with this pipeline, Stevie?
So I think even we saw this in the budget as well. Prime Minister Carney is a man with a vision, and he's not willing to adjust that vision for partisan reasons. He was elected during a trade war to, bring his expertise to bear on the situation. I think he's a very smart man, and I think he knows what he wants to do. I think he has not perhaps been engaging and bringing caucus along with him because he's got this vision. He knows he needs to move fast, but it has had the result here of Minister Guilbeault stepping away from cabinet. But fortunately for Prime Minister Carney, or maybe this was part of the discussion, I don't know, he remains part of caucus.
For now.
For now.
We don't know what the future holds on this one.
That's true, but for now, so it doesn't change the vote makeup in the House.
Okay. What does this say to you about the challenge of this type of MOU and what it would create for the Prime Minister, given that he has a caucus, many of whom were very supportive of the former Liberal government and their environmental focus, Cole?
Yeah, I think that's the conflict here. I think a lot of members of the Liberal caucus thought they were getting the Mark Carney as he described himself in his book and in his previous work. Mark Carney, as part of one of his previous organizations, had talked about getting investment banks to divest from investments in oil and gas and the natural resource sector in Canada. So I think the more environmentalist wing of the Liberal Party thought that was the Mark Carney that they were going to get. Now, with this MOU and perhaps a bit of the budget, that's, more left-wing environmental part of the Liberal caucus is wondering, hey, is this exactly what we were getting when, we elected Mark Carney leader? And, apparently it was too much for Steven Guilbeault, who has decided to leave cabinet over this. And as we know, he remains in caucus, but we'll see how things move going forward and how he eventually ends up voting, because this is enough for at least one Trudeau-era minister to say, this is too much of a far cry from the Trudeau Liberal governance, and we'll see where we want to take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to say something more?
This is definitely not Trudeau's Liberal Party anymore. I think you can see that on some of the environmental pieces and also on the consultation pieces. Trudeau perhaps consulted and talked too much, and maybe Prime Minister Carney could go a little bit farther in that way. But it is a trade war. He did say that he was going to do these things. He needs to double non-U.S. trade and create an energy superpower. And I'm not quite sure how you can do either of those things without working with Alberta on a solution.
Okay, except that, we're talking about the Liberal caucus here, but we should also talk about who voted for the Liberal Party in the last election, because arguably there were many New Democrats and Bloc Québécois voters who lent their vote to the Liberal Party to make sure that Mark Carney would win and the Liberal Party would win. But here you have today, for example, the Bloc Québécois leader saying that essentially Mark Carney has abandoned all liberal principles around the environment. How difficult is this going to be if and when we're up against another election, if Mark Carney loses that part of the vote that the Liberals have been relying on, Stevie?
So yeah, I've been thinking about this all week since the pipeline rumors came up. There's going to be repercussions in the polls, probably from the NDP, where that vote collapsed to help Carney win in the last election. I think the hope is that there will be more pickup towards the centrist vote to make up for what's lost on the left. Mm-hmm. Whether that's going to pan out, I'm not sure. I think we're going to have to do a lot more work in 905 area region issues, probably why we saw the steel announcement yesterday as well, Hamilton and other tariff-impacted regions. But yeah, it's a gamble. It's going to have to, the whole voting coalition is going to have to shift a little bit to the right.
Yeah, how does this change the calculus, do you think, if and when another vote happens, Cole?
Yeah, so I wonder if, Steven Guilbeault is representative of any sort of voting chunk, whether it's in Quebec or environmentalists in British Columbia. Do they then shift back to the NDP? They're not going from, Trudeau's Liberal Party to Carney's party and then, to the NDP. Where do they end up? So I'll be curious to see how that plays out, because that's not a contingent that I think Liberals were, the people that voted for the Liberal Party in the last federal election were much different than the people who voted for Justin Trudeau in 2015. So how does Mark Carney square this circle for his next voting coalition?
Yeah, well, it does lead me then to the federal Conservatives, because they now find themselves in a position where they have to criticize a deal that their Alberta cousins, including your Alberta cousin, who's not a Conservative, is actually praising today. Have the Liberals in this moment in time eaten another Conservative lunch that they can campaign on? To your point, Stevie, trying to aim for that center.
Yeah, I don't think their criticisms of the MOU are landing very well. I think they're scrambling a little bit. I'm sure they miss Trudeau. And the easy contrast there. They're going to have to pivot and find other issues, I think, to attack Carney on. It's not going to be on climate. It's not going to be, so on the energy piece, they're going to have to look towards, whether it's crime or other issues that impact, like I said, I think the 905 area. And I expect we'll see them pivot there.
Yeah, how difficult is this moment for federal Conservatives if they're forced to criticize this deal okayed by the Alberta Premier?
Yeah, there's a few pieces at play here for the Conservative movement. In Alberta, Danielle Smith was asked today, do you think this does enough to address Western separatism in Alberta? And she said, because in her opinion, the way that Justin Trudeau governed the country in relation to Alberta and energy policies, that created more Western separatist movement. Justin Trudeau, not unlike his father with the National Energy Project and Justin Trudeau's carbon tax, these were policies that brought in some discontent for Western Canadians and Albertans. Now we see a shift away from that. Mulroney got rid of the National Energy Policy, and that sort of addressed Western feelings of alienation at the time. Now we're seeing Mark Carney make some moves here that hopefully will address some of that Western separatist sentiment. And Danielle Smith can point to, look, here are the 9 bad laws that I wanted the federal Liberals to change. We've made some progress on at least 7 out of 9. The tanker ban, the emissions cap, the net zero by 2035 was pushed to 2050. Danielle Smith can point to those things and point to success in that regard, getting progress with a Liberal government and say, look, this is much better than what we got with the last guy. We're actually making some progress. Where the potential conflict there is the Conservatives on the federal level have to say, okay, look, we've made some progress here. The Alberta government is doing good work, but when will there actually be shovels in the ground? When will this project actually take off? And when will we see some actual progress? So therein lies the potential conflict.
Potential conflict, but does that land to the point that you were making, Stevie, earlier on?
Well, one of the things I'm thinking of is, will any of this get to the spring timeline of when it's going to be referred to, because the likelihood of a confidence motion early in the new year is high. They happen, as a routine. And do the Liberals have the votes in the House to pass it? Anything? I doubt Elizabeth May is going to be on side next time. Can we convince a few more Conservatives, perhaps from Alberta, to cross the floor and join and create that a majority? Otherwise, I don't think it's going to last very long before we're back in an election.
Okay, bite your tongue. So we'll see how it all goes. But listen, Stevie, Cole, thank you for this. Some initial reaction. Of course, we'll keep following the story.
Thanks.